Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Politics. Just one thing I would like to say before we get started. This program and all the programs that we do are sponsored by Prayer Box Ministry. If you'd like to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do, go over there and check us out on the web, prayerboxministry.org. We like to say that you could go over there, do one thing every day, and you would never repeat for 7 years. So go over there and check us out. There's a lot of stuff over there. Okay, two stories I want to cover today. And the first one is about that reporter that got killed. His name is Khashoggi. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this guy. He is a Muslim. He is from Saudi Arabia. He is not even a U.S. citizen, but he was a reporter, supposedly. And the story is that he was called into the ambassador's residence in Jordan, I believe. And then a hit squad of 17 Saudi Arabians walked into the Saudi Arabian embassy in Jordan and killed this guy, carved him up into pieces, and took his body somewhere. Nobody knows. He still hasn't been found. Now, it's terrible. Whether he's American or not, it's terrible. But I want you to remember the fact he's not an American citizen and he's not an American. Yet he works for the American press. Okay, that's important. So this story has been on the front pages for weeks and weeks now. And it occurred to me, I was thinking back to the time when Obama was in office and the events in the Middle East were going out of control. Now, if you remember rightly, we had episodes, lots of them, and it was a common thing where they would take Christians out in a line of 15 or 20 of them, have them kneel down in front of these Muslims, and these Muslims would cut their heads off with knives. 15 or 20 of them at a time, and it was happening weekly or bi-weekly. Rarely made the headlines. Nothing was ever demanded of the American government. There was instances we saw where they were putting Christians into cages, throwing gasoline on them and lighting them on fire. There was instances where, and when I say instances, I mean that was becoming more and more popular, throwing homosexuals off the top of tall buildings and watching them crash at the bottom. That was a new pastime for the Muslims. None of those things tended to make the headlines. None of those things demanded any action from the U.S. government. The one that did get a little bit of attention from Obama and his administration was when one of those groups went in and took a whole city of girls, schoolgirls. There was like 40 or 50 of them, and were selling them into sex trade. Well, after about the 10th one that happened, El Shabbat, I think, was the name of the group. Obama got on and he made a big deal about it on the TV and in the press, and nothing ever came of it. He didn't send anybody over there. He was just trying to give it publicity. Girls were never found. They released some of them, I suspect because they were sick or unsaleable, but they released some of them. Some of them got pregnant. These are grade school girls. But again, didn't make big headlines. Now, this Khashoggi versus the Martyrs is what I called this. Reporters versus the Martyrs. Now, I want to look at it from three different standpoints: from the press's standpoint, from the our government standpoint, and from the American people standpoint. Now, the press is trying to embarrass Trump and put pressure on the Trump administration to do something about the guys that killed this Khashoggi. He's not an American. If that guy had been an American, Trump would have been over there in a heartbeat. Guy's not American. If you want to be a Muslim and you're in a Muslim country and you want to go into a Muslim thing, then you better be prepared to deal with the Muslims. But the whole time, that 3 or 4 year period where the martyrs were having their heads cut off, being burned alive, being thrown off of buildings, the press ignored it. Didn't want to put pressure on Obama. What about, do you remember when the Iranians boarded an American ship, military ship, captured the men on the ship, had them all kneel down at the front of the ship, and then videotaped them with their hands up behind their head, kneeling down? Remember that? That got played for about a day or two. What about the Christian hostages around the country, around the world? North Korea. China just went through a big crackdown on Christians in China. Who knows how many thousands of Christians are in prison? They're not going to do anything about it because hating Christians is a higher priority than hating Trump. Believe it or not, that's what the actions of the press is saying. But for the death of this one non-American person, they have been trying to put pressure on Trump to do something. And for years, they ignored, or basically ignored, all of the other things that we've talked about. Thousands of people being killed and beheaded and burned. And from the press's standpoint, this Khashoggi thing sounds like it was actually investigated. One of the things that we've seen in the last two administrations is the press has stopped doing investigative reporting. Now they're just an extension of the Democratic National Committee. They don't get out there and dig and try to report truth and facts. They do not want to report. They want to give us the information that the DNC wants us to have. But the other groups that we talked about, the Christians, the beheaded, the burnt, all ignored by the United States press. This Khashoggi thing has been reported just about every day for weeks. How often was it reported by the press about the martyrs? Ignored. And I want to ask you a question. Nobody has said this, but with all of this attention being given to this non-American reporter, what do you think the odds were if this guy was an American, but he was a preacher, a white preacher? Do you think he'd be getting any attention? If he was a black preacher, maybe. But not if he was a pastor of a Christian church, he wouldn't, even if he was a black guy. Nope. Because hating Christians is a higher priority than hating Trump. Trump is one man and he's going to be gone. In 6 years, his administration will be done. He'll be gone. But Christians will be here until Jesus comes. So hating Christians is a higher priority than hating Trump. Now, let's look at it from the senators and representatives' viewpoint. The never Trumpers. Do you think they're doing anything? They're doing all they can. They're on the side of the press. I've got a story here I'm going to go over in a few minutes to show you that these never Trumpers are trying to put the same amount of pressure, even Republican Trumpers, never Trumpers, are trying to, or are on the side of the press. Were the Christian senators being heard when the martyrs were being killed? Nope. When the American martyrs were being burned alive and beheaded, were the Christian representatives anywhere speaking out, trying to put pressure on Obama to do something? Nope. The senators and representatives of our government are playing to the press and the left wing. They don't care about the martyrs. They don't care about Khashoggi. They don't care about the American people. They care about playing to the press and to the left wing. And that's uh, Republicans and Democrats, the never Trumpers and the Democrats, playing to the press and the left wing. They don't have a moral compass. The senators and representatives of our government want to put sanctions against 17 people. Well, they have. They've put sanctions against 17 Saudi Arabians because of a non-American, one non-American reporter. And they've put sanctions on 17 people that were supposedly that hit gang that went in there and got him. Now, from my standpoint, again, it was a terrible thing. First off, there's no corpus delicti. We got no body. Secondly, he's not an American. Thirdly, he was on foreign soil. So a non-American is killed by 17 non-Americans, and yet the American government is going to put sanctions on 17 people? If one non-American death is that important, then how come every time a Christian is killed anywhere in the world, we're not putting sanctions on whoever killed them? How come we didn't send the CIA over there to capture all of those Al Qaeda guys that were beheading our people? The martyrs are being ignored, not only by the press, but also by the senators or representatives of our government. This reporter, Khashoggi, was not an American. He had a green card. Do you think if a Middle Eastern preacher was killed like that, anything would have been done? Absolutely not. They would have ignored it, just like they ignored all the other Christians being beheaded and burned and thrown off of buildings. This is an outrage. This is an absolute outrage. And this whole thing has been instigated by the American press and the American left. Has nothing to do with this Khashoggi. This Khashoggi is just an excuse. And our American government is falling for it. It's an absolute disgrace, in my opinion. Now, let's look at this story from the viewpoint of we the people. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of hearing about it. I don't care what happens to the 17 people. I don't care what Trump does with Saudi Arabia. I don't care if nothing happens. I don't care. I could really care less. I did not elect Donald Trump to be the moral ambassador to the world. We elected Donald Trump to protect our borders, to protect the American people. Now, if they're so worried about American lives, then why are the left and the Democrat fighting him on the wall on our southern border? I saw the report the other day. 200 of the 2,000 that are in that caravan have got diseases. I mean, AIDS, cancer, typhoid, major diseases, communicable diseases. But they're not worried about that. The left and the liberals, they don't care about that. Let them come in. So Americans catch AIDS and die because of these guys. Who cares? He's just another AIDS. Okay, so they beheaded 15 people on the internet. It's just 15 Christians. Who cares? And those are recorded. We know these to be a fact. This Khashoggi, we haven't seen a body, and he was not American. These Mexicans are killing Americans. These people in these caravans, whether intentional or not, are killing Americans. If one American catches typhoid, which is highly communicable, from anybody in that thing, they're killing Americans. But they don't care about that. But let one reporter that's not American get killed on a foreign land by a foreign people, and the whole press is ready to throw everything but the kitchen sink at them. It makes no logical sense to me at all. And to anybody that's a thinking person, it makes no logical sense. The only sense that it makes is that we get to throw a different stone of a different size at Trump. That's all it is to them. They don't care about Khashoggi. I think it's an absolute outrage. From the viewpoint of the American people, I think we as a people believe that everybody that's involved is lying. I think the people in the ambassador's house is lying. They're trying to get leverage over Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia is lying about ordering the guys hit. They probably did. I think the 17 hit guys are lying. They probably did kill him. I think the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is lying to the world. He probably did order it. I think the United States press is lying that they care about Khashoggi. I think the senators and representatives that are supporting this in our government are lying because all they really want to do is bash Trump. I think everybody involved in this story or non-story is lying. They all have reason to. And I'm sick of hearing about it. Yet on the other hand, we know for a fact that over and over and over, Americans and Christians were being beheaded and burned live on camera and showed to the American people. Nobody lied there. Nobody had outrage either. Now, we as American people, who are thinking people, not drones, I believe this is the number one thing we all need to keep in mind. Our national security is more important than one person. Think about that. Trump probably knows that the Crown Prince ordered the killing, but he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said that Saudi Arabia is an important partner in the Middle East for the United States, and he's not going to do anything to disrupt that. We've had to deal with thugs before, and we'll deal with thugs again. And here's why I trust his thinking. Has anything happened in the Middle East that's to the detriment of the United States since Trump's been in office? Think about when Obama was in office. Israel was fighting all the time. There was war in the Middle East in several countries. The caliphate was taking over 2 or 3 different countries. The Russians were bombing Syria. Syria was a powder keg exploding. Iran was divided into 2 or 3 parts and getting ready to fall. Trump comes into office, and all of a sudden, everything is settled down. So, if our commander-in-chief, who is being successful all the way around the world in foreign relations, if he says that our national security is at risk, I believe him. And just to give you an example, I want you to think about this. Kennedy, our United States President, John F. Kennedy, was killed. And they had the Warren, I think it was the Warren Commission that looked into Kennedy. And they kept the reports quiet. And then the 50 years expired and they were supposed to make it public, and they kept it quiet again. There's probably some really bad stuff in there. But our national security is more important than the life of one person. And that was a U.S. citizen. That was a U.S. president. But for the press and our representatives and senators to put the life of some non-American reporter above the word and responsibility that we gave to Donald Trump is an absolute outrage. And I want to give you an example. I told you I had an article I wanted to go over. I want to give you an example of what our representatives are doing. Now, listen to this. The Republican-led Senate dealt a rebuke to the White House, voting to advance a measure to withdraw U.S. support for Saudi-led forces in Yemen and defying top administration officials who hours earlier had urged lawmakers to do the opposite. Now, the Republican Senate is doing what, in the Middle East, the opposite of what Trump just told them. Why do you think they did that? Well, let's go on and read. The 63 to 37. Okay. That's important, and I want to tell you why. 63, we have 53 Republican senators, but they got a vote of 63 to vote against the president. That includes not only Democrats, but that's the never Trumpers I was telling you about. That means there's only 37 who are with Trump. That's the real number. The 63-37 vote underscored the senators' frustration over President Trump's reluctance to hold Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman responsible for the early October killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi agents in the country's consulate in Istanbul. It was Turkey. So the U.S. Senate not only is talking and going to the press, they are taking legislative action against our president over a non-American reporter. That's an outrage. It goes on to say, the fact that we haven't forced the Crown Prince to come clean is creating a problem, said Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Corker. Bob Corker is, he quit. He's a never-Trumper, he's an anti-Trumper, and he's a wuss when it comes to foreign relations. And he says it's causing a problem. I have no problem. There's no problem in the Middle East, but Bob Corker says there is. Mr. Corker said he supported the measure in its initial vote Wednesday because it allows us to somehow or other to address this since the administration appears unwilling to do so. I'll tell you what, if you want to address something about our national security, why don't you get up off your ass and vote to put the money on the wall? Let's build the wall. Instead of worrying about a non-American reporter, Muslim reporter, who was in a Muslim country. Mr. Trump has reportedly, by the way, I love it when they do this. As often as they can, they take away the title of president. They say Mr. Trump or Trump. So here we go. Mr. Trump has reportedly dismissed U.S. intelligence conclusions that the Saudi crown prince ordered the killing of dissident journalists. That is not true. He has accepted what they are telling him. He has decided that national security is more important than one stupid non-American Muslim reporter. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis has argued that even though Saudi Arabia was an imperfect ally, withdrawing U.S. support would only harm the international effort to secure an end to the conflict, which puts Saudi-led coalition against Iran-allied Houthi militants. And that's the second to the last paragraph in the story, by the way. And there is finally the right answer. Even if the Yemen resolution passes the Senate, it faces a less receptive atmosphere in the House. Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat California, introduced a similar resolution in the House earlier this year, but House GOP leaders blocked a vote on it this month. You see what I mean? The U.S. Senate, by a vote of 63 to 37, has voted to go against the President of the United States and his wishes and to end support for a whole country, Yemen, to end support for the whole country over a non-American Muslim reporter. Why the American people aren't in an absolute outrage, I don't know. I don't know. All right. The second story I want to talk about is, and I listed it up front as socialism with the question mark. And I did it that way to get by the people at Facebook and Google, so they will at least let me put it on the sites without shadow blocking me anymore, which, by the way, that's gotten really, really bad. There's very few people see any of our stuff anymore. I went back and checked the numbers, and I thought it was half. They've done more than that. We have probably, well, I know we have over 3,000 people that watch just one of our sites, and we've got 3 sites. And out of those 3,000, I only hear from the same 20 or 30. I even made a post the other day. It says, I know I'm being shadow blocked. If you see this, just say hi so I know that you're still seeing it. Out of 30-some hundred people, 25, ballpark, 25 responded. Outrageous. Nothing we could do. That's why I put the sign back here so you can understand how to see our stuff, and I do ask, by the way, if you go over there, either earmark our page, or you can make an icon and put it on your desktop, because for all I know, we could be off the air tomorrow, and the website is the only way I will have to communicate with people. So please go over there. We want to try to build as much traffic, permanent traffic over there as we can. So prayerboxministry.org. Go ahead. Okay. So I went down a rabbit trail. It was not my intention, but started talking about shadow. So, okay. So socialism question mark. I've done a series of programs talking about the young people in socialism, and and I understand the problem pretty well. I'm pretty sure that the millennial generation right now is a culmination of 40 or 50 years of indoctrination, slowly but surely over time, on our American kids through education, misinformation, misleading, the whole gamut of things that they have done to our children. And this is the culmination. Now, the problem is that the American parents, for the most part, were not aware of it, even though I tried to tell everybody. And now they're waking up and trying to figure out, why do their kids feel this way? And right here and right now, we are living through the prime example why socialism doesn't work. There could not be a more divergent picture that we can see. Capitalism in the United States, with the right principles under Donald Trump, is going crazy. Our economy is just doing gangbusters. We are carrying the rest of the world on our shoulders right now. Now, I want you to think about that. Then, the socialist country is Venezuela. Did you know that 10 years ago, Venezuela was the richest country outside of the United States on the American continent? It was richer than Mexico. It was richer than Canada. It was richer than any South American country. Venezuela. They had the highest standard of living of any other country except North America on the planet, including Canada. They had the highest oil output on this planet outside of, on this continent outside of the United States, including Mexico and Canada. And that was under capitalism. The people decided that they wanted socialism down there, so they brought in a socialist. And here we are 10 years later. They're the poorest country on this continent. They have no food. Their money isn't worth the toilet paper it's written on. People are rioting in the streets. And the socialist government is absolutely tearing that country apart. We as Americans need to send our kids down there. Let them go down there and spend a week. If every high school in the country did that for 1 week, first off, we'd probably lift their economy up. But can you imagine high schools from 100 U.S. cities a week down there? But let them see how the people live. Let them look at the grocery stores and what those look like. Let them see how they have to buy gasoline. So anyway, in the paper this week, the Wall Street Journal, was an article by Karl Rove, who, by the way, I used to think was a good guy, but now that he does these op-ed pieces in the Wall Street Journal. I think he does one a week. He is not really a Republican. He's not a populist. He's a establishment Republican. But even he says the name of this article is "Stopping the Socialist Resurgence." And I don't want to read the whole thing, but I do want to read a couple. So Senator Bernie Sanders knows what he wants. In a Washington Post op-ed last week, the Democratic Socialist from Vermont laid out a legislation agenda for the 116th Congress' first 100 days. Among the dizzying array of proposals, Mr. Sanders pushed a Medicare for All bill, tuition-free college, student debt relief, tax increases requiring wealthy people and larger corporations to begin paying their fair share, and a $15 minimum wage index to median wage growth, not inflation. Okay. Let me go back over and read that slower so you can hear what he wants to do. Medicare for all, tuition-free college, student debt relief. That means everybody that's got student debt right now, just kiss it goodbye. Tax increases requiring wealthy people and large corporations to begin paying their fair share. Those two pay the 80% of the U.S. taxes now anyway. And a $15 minimum wage index tied to the median wage growth, not inflation. Okay, there's the list, the 5 things he wants done. Okay, let me just take one of those. Medicaid for all. The total U.S. budget is $4 trillion. Okay, the whole budget, including military, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all the programs, all the government, all of it, $4 trillion. Okay, If we could snap our fingers and say, okay, tomorrow everybody has Medicaid for all, everybody has free insurance or health insurance, that would cost $3.2 trillion a year. That means just to take care of Medicare for all, our taxes would have to double. I don't want to pay higher tax. I don't want my taxes to double. You take the average person, if they're paying 25% taxes and they double, that's 50%. So if you're making $50,000, that means you're now going to be making $25,000. Wouldn't it be smarter to keep our taxes the same and let them go out and get their own insurance? They're not going to be paying $25,000 a year for insurance. Free everything. I was down talking to my son a year or two. No, it was before the 2016 election. So that'd be 2016. He is 30 years old. He's got a bunch of buddies that were down there. And I kept my mouth shut. My son is a Republican, by the way, conservative Republican. Good for him. But his buddies were all saying, well, yeah, I think Medicare for all is a great idea. They were all Bernie-crats. He said, well, if they want to pay for my college tuition, why not? And these guys are all college grads. First off, one thing that I have noticed, and it's not just these guys, but anytime you talk to any liberal, one thing that U.S. government has done, when I was talking earlier about the brainwashing, this is one thing that they have done very, very well. The government will pay. Let the government pay for Medicaid for all. Let the government pay. Let the government pay. Let the government pay. Okay, the government doesn't pay anything. The U.S. taxpayer pays everything. We pay for the government. We pay for the military. We pay for Social Security. We pay to run the bureaucracy. The United States people pay for that. The government doesn't pay for anything. All they do is take the money in and spend more than they take in. Then he talks about Ocasio-Cortez's plan, that airhead Democrat from New York. Man, she's got an accounting degree and she's dumber than a box of rocks. I'm sorry. But she's talking about a Green New Deal. Sounding too much like a Maoist functionary, she describes it as a national industrial economic mobilization plan to make America carbon neutral. I got nothing. Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez's plan would end U.S. use of nuclear energy and fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas within 10 years. She promises to upgrade every residential and industrial building for state-of-the-art energy efficiency, comfort, and safety, and virtually eliminate poverty by guaranteeing a living wage job to every person who wants one, while mitigating deeply entrenched racial, regional, and gender-based inequalities in income and wealth through a universal basic income, universal health care, and other measures. Okay. You think if you took every dollar that every American in this country makes and gave it to the U.S. government, we couldn't do any of that. Just to do Medicaid for all, our taxes would have to go up to 50%. Then if you want to give what was one of the other ones? Oh, tax-free tuition. Now you think about the number of people there are in this country that go to college and how much. The last I heard, the debt on student loans is over $1 trillion. Okay, so if you wanted just to forgive that debt, our taxes would have to go up again. Let's see, 25%. If our budget is 4 trillion and to forgive the debt is going to be 1 trillion and then 1 trillion every year for the new students, that means our taxes have to go up another 25%. So now we're all paying 75% taxes, and we haven't done any of this other stuff. What's another one? So they think that by doing this, us paying 75%, oh, plus a $15 an hour wage. Yeah, they tried that out in commie land. I mean, Washington. Companies companies shut down. Small businesses shut down. And they were getting ready to tax Google's employees. Uh, they were going to tax Google X amount of dollars for each employee they had. And Google said, yeah, we're moving. So they immediately pulled it back. Well, don't you think that's what American businesses are going to do if any of this stuff is done? They'll just pack their bags and go overseas somewhere, just like they did under Obama. I just don't believe that people can possibly be that stupid. Republicans must resist the temptation simply to dismiss these radical democratic ideas with wisecracks and insults. Enthusiasm for socialism and antagonism to capitalism have surged among millennials and Gen Zers. State-run economies may have been discredited by the 20th century, but that doesn't mean new forms of socialism can't gain a following. Republicans must do the hard work of updating old arguments. Well, if they mean the new types like they got in the UK is in a big problem. That whole Brexit thing they're doing right now is because of their socialism policies. They give everybody on the dole over there, so when these illegals come in, they go right there, sign up for benefits, and sit at home and breed like rabbits, just like the Mexicans do. Did you know that for every Mexican, legal or illegal, that comes into this country, they bring in seven other Mexicans to this country, and they all get on the dole? If we would allow only Americans to receive benefits, that'd stop a lot of them. The average Social Security check in this country is $1,200 a month, and we have been paying into that as Americans. We have paid into that much, much, much more than that. The illegals that are coming in here, their average check is around $3,200, and they haven't paid a damn dime. And American people aren't upset? I don't understand that. Consider the arguments against Medicare for all. Do voters really want to abolish private insurance? After watching the Department of Veterans Affairs bungle the treatment of the nation's warriors, do Americans want their personal health decisions made by unwieldy, unresponsive federal government? Do they want the wait times, the decline in quality, and the slowing of innovation that would come with the takeover by a new federal bureaucracy? And how will the country pay the $32 trillion cost of the Medicare expansion? The average working couple already pays $158,000 in Medicare taxes over their careers. How would they like to see their taxes skyrocket and their care cut? Democrats should be forced to answer for their radical, wild ideas. It's possible this approach would allow Democrats to set the terms of discussion, but sometimes political parties need to take advantage of opportunities their opposition creates. It's true that democratic socialists, which by the way, there's no such thing. They are socialists. There's no such thing as a Democrat socialist. That's just a phrase they're using. are unlikely to pass the House, and even if they do, the Republican Senate and President Trump can stop them from becoming laws. Still, there are at least 123 House sponsors of Medicare for All. Think about that. We got 435, and out of that, 123 want socialism. And that idea and other left-wing ones like it are gaining purchase within the Democratic Party. A GOP campaign against the Democrats' economic radicalism may give talented centrist Democrats in Congress a chance to improve their fortunes in red or purple districts. I want to end by saying we have a teaching moment here for those of us that, especially for those of us that lived through the Reagan Revolution. We know for a fact there's been two boom times in our lifetime. One was under Reagan and one is under Trump, and they both have the same things in common. Conservative ideas with the economy. You cut taxes, you cut regulation, you cut the size of government, and you give Americans incentive to go do what they do. And the economy goes crazy every time. And yet, the liberals and the Democrats don't see it. And they're brainwashing our children. This is a time when we should be pounding it into our kids' head that this is a good time. This is a boom time. You're likely to not witness another boom time like this in your lifetime unless you get lucky. But the smart thing to do is to always vote for conservative viewpoints. And they don't have to be Republican. They just tend to be Republican. But if Kennedy was a conservative, he cut taxes when he went in and he cut regulation. By today's standard, he was a conservative Democrat. If the Democrats want to run a conservative that's going to keep doing what Trump's doing, great, put him in there. I have no problem with that. I am not married to a party. I have ideas and beliefs. And that's what we need to do, and that's what we need to be teaching our kids. Conservatism works. Always has, always will. Well, that's program, everyone. I just want to remind you again, go over, if you want to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do, go over to prayerboxministry.org. There's lots to do over there. You can have somebody read the Bible to you. You can join a prayer group. You can watch past issues of this show or the Right Wing Reverend. We do a bunch of blogs over there. You can go over there and check out. But go over there and check us out, prayerboxministry.org. Well, that's a program, everyone. I look forward to next week when we can sit down and talk about this week in politics. You have a blessed week.